unexpected patient. The emergency alert blared through Metropolitan Hospital's corridors just as Dr. Amara Reed was finishing her rounds. The overhead speaker crackled with urgency. Code Blue ER Bay 3. Cardiac team requested immediately. Amara broke into a controlled run, her white coat billowing behind her as she headed for the emergency department. At 39, she was one of the hospital's most respected cardiologists, known for her steady hands, brilliant diagnostic mind, and unflappable composure under pressure. "What do we have?" she asked, pushing through the ER doors. Dr. Mason, the emergency physician, responded without looking up from the patient. Male, early 40s, major myocardial infarction, BP crashing, arrhythmia, lost pulse once in the ambulance. No prior cardiac history. Amara stepped to the bedside, slipping on gloves with practiced efficiency. The patient lay unconscious, oxygen mask obscuring most of his face, his expensive suit cut away to attach monitoring equipment. She began her assessment, her mind already calculating treatment protocols. "We need to get him to the cath lab immediately. Let's—" The words died in her throat as one of the nurses shifted the oxygen mask slightly to adjust the fit. Amara's hands froze mid-motion. No, it couldn't be. But there was no mistaking that face, even paler and older than she remembered. Julian Alexander, CEO of Alexander Global Investments. The man whose ambition had once meant more to him than their love. The man who had walked away from her 11 years ago when she told him she was pregnant. The father of the son he never knew existed. For one dangerous second, the world tilted beneath Amara's feet. Then her medical training asserted itself, pushing personal shock aside. "Start him on heparin," she ordered, voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside her chest. "Prep for emergency angioplasty. We need to clear that blockage now." The next hours passed in a blur of focused intensity. Amara's hands never trembled as she worked to save Julian's life, threading the catheter through his femoral artery, watching the monitor as she located the blockage in his left anterior descending artery, the infamous widowmaker. "Severe occlusion," she murmured to the attending team. "Deploying stent now." When it was over, when Julian's vitals stabilized and the immediate danger had passed, Amara stepped back, suddenly aware of the sweat that had soaked through her scrubs and the ache in her shoulders from hours of sustained tension. "Excellent work, Dr. Reed," the cardiac nurse said admiringly. "I thought we'd lose him for sure." "He's not out of the woods yet," Amara replied professionally. "Keep him closely monitored in ICU. I want updates every 30 minutes. Only when she reached the privacy of her office did Amara allow herself to react. She sank into her chair, hands finally giving in to the tremors she'd suppressed during the procedure. On her desk sat a framed photograph of her son, Elijah, grinning widely at his last birthday celebration, his dark eyes, Julian's eyes, bright with happiness. 10 years old. Growing up without the father who had chosen career over family, the father who had no idea he existed. Amara had never told Julian about the pregnancy after their final conversation. His words had been brutally clear. "I'm not ready for this, Amara. I've worked too hard to get where I am. Children aren't part of my 5-year plan." She'd walked away with her pride intact, determined to finish medical school despite the challenges of impending motherhood. Her friends had urged her to demand child support, to force Julian to acknowledge his responsibilities. But Amara had refused. "I don't want anything from someone who doesn't want us," she'd told them, one hand protectively covering her growing belly. Now, 11 years later, fate had placed Julian's life literally in her hands. She had saved him. The physician in her could never have done otherwise, but what came next? Hospital protocol would expect her to continue as his doctor. How could she face him when he regained consciousness? How could she maintain professional detachment with the man who had once held her heart before shattering it completely? Her desk phone rang, startling her from her thoughts. "Dr. Reed, Mr. Alexander is being settled in ICU. His family has been notified and his assistant is asking for an update." Amara took a steadying breath. "I'll be right there." In the ICU waiting room, she found a petite woman in an immaculate suit, typing frantically on a tablet. The woman looked up as Amara approached. "Dr. Reed? I'm Victoria Palmer, Mr. Alexander's executive assistant." "How is he?" "Mr. Alexander suffered a significant myocardial infarction, a heart attack," Amara explained, slipping into clinical language like armor. "We've placed a stent to restore blood flow to his heart, The next 24 to 48 hours will be critical, but he's currently stable. Thank you, doctor. The board members are in crisis mode. Alexander Global is in the middle of a major acquisition. Victoria paused. Julian has always seemed invincible. It's hard to imagine. Heart disease doesn't discriminate, Amara said quietly. Even the seemingly invincible have their vulnerabilities. His parents are flying in from Europe. They should arrive by morning. Victoria hesitated. Is there anyone else who should be notified? A girlfriend, perhaps? Something twisted in Amara's chest. I wouldn't know. That's something you'd need to determine from his personal records. Of course. It's just 11 years as his assistant, and I've never known him to have a serious relationship. Work has always been his life. The revelation shouldn't have affected Amara, but it did. Julian had chosen ambition over love, over family, and apparently never replaced what he'd rejected. If you'll excuse me, I need to check on my patient, Amara said, retreating to the clinical safety of her role. In the ICU, Julian lay surrounded by monitoring equipment, his powerful presence diminished by the hospital gown and the vulnerability of unconsciousness. Amara checked his vitals, adjusting his medication with careful precision. Standing beside his bed, memories flooded back unbidden. Julian at 28, laughing as they picnicked in Central Park between her study sessions. Julian bringing her coffee during all-night cramming for exams. Julian's arms around her, promising they would build a future together once she finished medical school, and he secured his position in the financial world. Empty promises, as it turned out. Now, 11 years later, his face showed the passage of time, distinguished lines at the corners of his eyes, silver threading through the dark hair at his temples, the face of a successful man who had achieved everything he'd ever wanted, except perhaps happiness. As Amara completed her examination, Julian's eyelids fluttered slightly. Mr. Alexander, she said professionally. Can you hear me? His eyes remained closed, but his fingers twitched. He would likely regain consciousness soon, and Amara needed to decide, should she remove herself from his case, citing their personal history? Or continue as his physician, facing the inevitable moment when he would open his eyes and recognize the woman he had abandoned all those years ago. Her pager beeped, another cardiac emergency requiring her expertise. The decision would have to wait. For now, duty called. And Dr. Amara Reed had never been one to shirk her responsibilities, no matter how personally painful they might be. With one last glance at the unconscious man who had once been the center of her world, Amara turned and walked purposefully toward her next patient, each step carrying her forward just as she had done since the day Julian walked away. Recognition Julian Alexander drifted toward consciousness through a fog of medication and pain. Beeping monitors gradually came into focus along with the sterile white ceiling of a hospital room. His chest felt like it had been crushed under an anvil. Mr. Alexander, can you hear me? The voice was professional, female, and hauntingly familiar. Julian turned his head slowly, blinking to clear his vision. His heart monitor suddenly spiked. Amara? His voice was a rasp, barely audible. Dr. Amara Reed stood at his bedside, chart in hand, white coat immaculate, her expression carefully neutral despite the storm in her dark eyes. I'm Dr. Reed. You're a cardiologist, she said formally. You suffered a major heart attack 3 days ago. We've placed a stent to clear the blockage in your coronary artery. Julian stared at her, unable to reconcile the poised physician before him with the passionate medical student he'd once known, the woman he'd abandoned when his ambition outweighed his love. It's really you, he whispered. Yes. Now about your condition. 11 years, he interrupted. You look different. Successful, confident, beautiful in ways he hadn't anticipated. Your recovery is my primary concern, Mr. Alexander, Amara continued professionally. Not our past acquaintance. You'll need several weeks of rest, followed by cardiac rehabilitation. Julian watched her explain his treatment plan, noting how carefully she maintained distance, both physical and emotional. This controlled physician was worlds away from the passionate woman he'd once loved, the woman who'd tearfully told him she was pregnant, only to have him reject both her and their child. Their child. The thought struck him with sudden force. Amara, did you? He began, but was interrupted by the arrival of his business partner. Julian, thank God, Marcus exclaimed, striding into the room. The Tokyo deal is hanging by a thread without you. Amara stepped back, clearly relieved by the interruption. "I'll check on you later, Mr. Alexander." "Wait," Julian called, but she was already gone. Marcus talked business for 30 minutes before casually mentioning, "Isn't your doctor the woman from that hospital fundraiser last month? The one with the young boy?" Julian's heart monitor betrayed his reaction. A young boy. The timing would be right. Over the following days, Julian's physical strength gradually returned, but Amara maintained strict professionalism during her brief visits, deflecting personal questions with medical discussions. When she wasn't present, Julian found himself watching the door, anticipating her arrival. One afternoon during physical therapy, Julian pushed himself too hard and collapsed, pride giving way to vulnerability as pain and weakness overwhelmed him. "You can't rush recovery," Amara said quietly, helping him back to bed. "Your heart needs time to heal." For a moment, their eyes met, physician and patient, former lovers, strangers with a shared history, and something shifted between them. "Some things can't be healed," Julian murmured. Before Amara could respond, her phone rang urgently. Her face paled as she listened. "Elijah fell during gym class," she explained to her colleague, already gathering her things. "They think his arm might be broken." Julian watched her hurried departure, the name echoing in his mind. Elijah. A boy with a possibly broken arm. A boy who would be about 10 years old. A boy who could be his son. Revelations. Julian discharged himself against medical advice the following day, ignoring Amara's objections. His private investigator confirmed what he already suspected. Amara had a 10-year-old son named Elijah, born 8 months after their relationship ended. His son. The child he never knew existed. He found Amara in her office, reviewing patient charts. "Were you ever going to tell me?" he asked without preamble. Amara closed her office door, resignation replacing surprise. "No," she answered honestly. "You made your choice 11 years ago. I respected it. I had a right to know I had a child. You told me children weren't part of your 5-year plan," she countered, "that your career came first. I believed you." Julian sank into a chair, the magnitude of what he'd missed overwhelming him. "What's he like?" he asked softly. Something softened in Amara's expression. "He's brilliant, curious, kind, loves science and basketball. He thinks his father was a medical researcher who died before he was born." The fiction stabbed at Julian. "You let him believe I was dead?" It seemed kinder than the truth, that his father chose not to be part of his life. Before Julian could respond, his phone buzzed with an urgent message from Marcus. The hospital acquisition deal needed his signature immediately. "I have to go," he said reluctantly. "But this conversation isn't over." Amara's brow furrowed. "What hospital acquisition?" "It's nothing," Julian dismissed, heading for the door. "Just business." But as he left for the emergency board meeting, Amara followed at a discreet distance, medical concern her justification. Outside the conference room, she overheard Marcus speaking. "Once we acquire Metropolitan, we'll restructure completely. Cut the unprofitable departments, including that pediatric cardiac program that's bleeding money." Amara froze. The pediatric cardiac program was her passion project, the program that had saved countless children, including some of Elijah's friends. When Julian emerged from the meeting, he found Amara waiting, fury evident in every line of her body. "You're buying my hospital to gut it?" she demanded. "It's not personal." "Everything is personal, Julian. That unprofitable program saves children's lives." Their argument escalated until Julian suddenly clutched his chest, face paling alarmingly. "Julian?" Amara's anger instantly transformed to professional concern. "I'm fine," he insisted, but his legs gave way beneath him. Once again, Amara found herself fighting to save the life of the man who had broken her heart, personal feelings set aside for the sake of medicine. Later, in recovery, Julian looked at her with new understanding. "You've saved me twice now," he said quietly. "I don't deserve it." "It's my job," Amara replied simply. "No," he disagreed. "It's who you are. You became exactly who you wanted to be. While he gestured weakly, all my success, and what do I have to show for it? No one who would miss me if I died on that boardroom floor." For the first time, Amara saw beyond the powerful businessman to the lonely man beneath, and something long buried stirred within her heart. Complications. 2 significant changes followed Julian's second cardiac episode. He halted the hospital acquisition, and he asked to meet his son. "He deserves to know the truth," Julian argued. And I deserve a chance to know him. After consulting her closest friend, Dr. Maya Patel, Amara reluctantly agreed to a carefully arranged meeting. Mom, why are we meeting your patient? Elijah asked as they entered the park. Because he's not just my patient, Amara explained gently. He's your father. Elijah's eyes widened. But you said my dad died. I thought it would be easier, she admitted. I was wrong. Julian approached cautiously, his usual confidence absent. When Elijah looked up at him with eyes that mirrored his own, Julian's carefully prepared speech vanished. You play basketball? He asked instead, noticing the ball Elijah carried. Their awkward conversation gradually evolved into a game of one-on-one, Elijah's natural athleticism evident despite Julian's careful restraint due to his condition. Watching them, Amara felt conflicting emotions surge. Joy at seeing Elijah's excitement, fear that Julian would eventually disappoint him as he had disappointed her. The tentative peace shattered 3 days later when Marcus, furious about the abandoned hospital deal, leaked the story to the media. Billionaire Julian Alexander's secret love child with doctor who saved his life. Reporters besieged the hospital and Elijah's school. Julian immediately moved them to his secured penthouse for protection. I'm sorry, he told Amara as they watched Elijah finally sleeping after a traumatic day. I never wanted this to touch either of you. What did you want, Julian? Amara asked quietly. 11 years ago and now? Then, success, recognition. Proving myself to a world that saw me as nothing. He looked at her directly. Now a chance to know my son, and maybe, to understand what I threw away when I let you go. The vulnerability in his expression stripped away the years of resentment Amara had harbored. When Julian tentatively reached for her hand, she didn't pull away. The simple touch ignited feelings neither had acknowledged still existed. Their faces drew closer, the magnetic pull of shared history and unresolved feelings drawing them together, until their lips met in a kiss that felt both familiar and entirely new. Amara broke away first, reality asserting itself. This doesn't fix anything, she said breathlessly. No, Julian agreed. But maybe it's a place to start. Healing Hearts' 6 months transformed Julian Alexander from ruthless CEO to a man rebuilding his life around newly discovered priorities. He stepped back from daily operations at his company to focus on establishing a relationship with Elijah, attending basketball games and science competitions with genuine enthusiasm. Amara observed these changes with cautious hope, but maintained emotional distance, unwilling to risk her heart again despite Julian's patient persistence. When Metropolitan Hospital's pediatric cardiac unit faced a funding crisis, an anonymous donation of $20 million saved the program. The hospital board insisted on knowing their benefactor, revealing Julian's contribution, made without fanfare or attempts to leverage Amara's gratitude. Why didn't you tell me? She asked him afterward. Would you have accepted it if you knew it came from me? He countered gently. Probably not, she admitted. I didn't do it for recognition or to impress you, Julian explained. I did it because it matters to you and to our son. Our son. The words still sounded strange, yet increasingly right as the months passed and Julian proved his commitment. At the hospital's annual charity gala, Julian surprised everyone with an unscheduled speech. 11 years ago I made the worst mistake of my life, he said, his eyes finding Amara in the crowd. I chose ambition over love, success over family. It took a heart attack and the extraordinary woman who saved me to understand what truly matters. He announced a new foundation supporting medical education for underprivileged students, inspired, he explained, by Amara's journey through medical school as a single mother. Later that evening, in a quiet moment away from the crowds, Amara finally allowed herself to acknowledge the transformation in the man before her. You've changed, she said simply. Nearly dying will do that, Julian replied. So will discovering you have a son, and realizing the woman you let go became extraordinary without you. His hand rose to his chest suddenly, a grimace crossing his features. Julian? Alarm filled Amara's voice as she guided him to her office, immediately checking his pulse. Just a small arrhythmia, he assured her as she listened to his heart. It happens sometimes. Their faces were inches apart as Amara completed her examination, the stethoscope still pressed to his chest. Your heart sounds stronger, she said softly. It is, he replied, his eyes never leaving hers. Strong enough to try again if you'd give me the chance. Amara hesitated. 11 years of single motherhood and hard-won independence making her cautious. I'm not that vulnerable student anymore, Julian. I won't put my life on hold for anyone. I would never ask you to, he promised. I fell in love with that student, but I admire the woman and doctor you've become even more. 1 year after Julian's heart attack, he returned for his follow-up appointment. Dr. Amara Reed checked his vitals with professional thoroughness, though her smile held a warmth reserved just for him. Well, Dr. Reed? Julian asked. What's the prognosis? Your heart has healed completely, she confirmed, her hand finding his. The simple gold band on her finger caught the light, both medically and metaphorically. They walked out together toward the parking lot where Elijah waited, eager to tell them about his science project. Toward the future they were building together, not as the struggling student and ambitious businessman they once were, but as equals who had found their way back to each other through the most unexpected of second chances.